Hey guys, this is Matt from Crank Engineering. We're on day 7 of the Greg's Garage 30-day challenge, and I just want to have a quick talk about the spindle bearings. We're going to have to order some replacements, so let's get them off and have a look. Okay, so there's a couple of other things we can do in parallel while we're waiting for paint to dry or doing something else, and that's to get rid of all the replaceable parts. Like the bearings, the belts and the seals. So I've ordered the South Bend restoration book, which is available from a few different suppliers online. There's one guy in Australia who sells them with the felt kits as well, so I can replace all the felts, so I consider them a consumable, so we'll get rid of those. Belts, I'm going to toss the 2 old belts as well. I don't know how long they've been on there, so they can go, and I've bought replacement belts, so they're ready to go. The only other thing we've got to do is the bearings. So I'm going to replace the spindle bearings, so I've got to order those. So let's just pull this apart and have a look at what we've got. Okay, so we've got to identify these bearings so we can order some new ones. And if you know all about bearings, then just skip this video and go and get a beer. If not, then we'll have a quick chat about bearings and I'll see if I can pass on something useful. So there's lots of different types of bearings, and these are generally classified as roller bearings because there's a rolling element, and hence they're called rolling element bearings. Now this is your typical garden variety ball bearing, so there's a bunch of balls in behind this cage, and they run in an inner race. There's an inner race on the inside and the outer race on the outside. So a roller, tapered roller bearing has a conical shaped rolling element, and they're held in position by this pressed steel cage, and there's an inner race, and the outer race is generally in the housing. So in the case of our lathe, let's have a look at the spindle. So the spindle was fitted in here, so there's our inner race still inside the housing, and here's the inner race with the rolling elements and the cage still intact on the shaft. So to identify this, there's generally some identifying numbers etched or marked on the races, and I can just see the edge of them there. I hope you can see that on the camera, but I can't read them, so I do have to get this bearing off. So that'll be one job we have to do, and I've got to figure out which way it comes off. Is this collar part of the shaft, or is it screw on? Now if it screws on, then maybe the bearing goes that way, but if it doesn't, and I'm suspecting it doesn't, this will be the shoulder that locates the bearing, then it's got to come off that way. So we'll work on that in a minute. The rolling element bearing at the other end, which was at the rear of the spindle, which fit in, oh, my bad, other way around. This one here, had it around the wrong way. So this is the tail end, and this is the head end. Sorry, that's not probably correct, but anyway, that's the bit near the chuck, that's the bit at the other end. So there it is in there. So in this particular case, I'm just going to give that face a wipe. And so it's Timken, made in the USA, and maybe 14138A. So there's a numerical designation, might have some letters with it as well, and all of those numbers and letters basically designate the type of bearing, the size and the features of the bearing. So we're going to identify that so that we can call the bearing shop and order an exact replacement. Now ideally, Hercus would have given me the bearing numbers in their parts manual, but they haven't. They've just called them front taper roller bearing and rear taper roller bearing. So they could have given me the size, so it would have made it a bit easier. But anyway, we'll have to pull them out and have a look. Now, I have looked at the parts book, and here's the spindle here, and I can see that collar here looks like it's part of the spindle. So there it is in the corner. So I'd say that spindle's fixed on there, which means this bearing has to be driven off this way. Now it doesn't come off, it doesn't just slide on. There'll be a slight interference fit between the spindle itself and the inner race of the bearing. So you need to use some force to get it off, and that could be a press if you've got one, or we could just put a sleeve over this and make sure we can catch the inner race, and then we can drive it off with a hammer. So that's probably the technique I'm going to use. Either way, even if you use a press, you still need a collar or something to sit over here to drive it off. Now you could potentially drive it off with a punch. You could punch it here, punch it here, punch it here, and just work your way around. But you're going to tend to, if you're punching it on one side, you're going to tend to cock it. So if I can find a collar, I was going to say if I had a lathe I could turn up at the right size collar, but I don't have a lathe because it's in pieces. So hopefully I'm going to be able to find something I can use to, piece of scrap I can use to catch this bearing. If not, I might be doing the punch method myself, unless I can find another way to do it. So let's see what we can find. We're also going to have to get these inner races out of the headstock. And same thing here, they're an interference fit as well. They don't just slide out, so we will need to figure out how to get those out, whether we have some sort of pulling tool to pull them out or we have to punch them out from the back. So let's get started. Okay, so I've gone through all my scrap bin, and this is not ideal, but it's about all I've got that will fit. It's not a perfect fit, but it's better than nothing. Better than using a punch, in my opinion. So it's only thin wall. It's in a piece of exhaust tube, I don't know, ½ inch or something, and it fits over the collar and it catches the inner race. Now it's a little loose, like it could be a little bit small, and this is one of the benefits of having a lathe, is you can just make this stuff if you need it. But I do have a lathe, I just can't use it. So I've got to make do one way or the other. So I'm going to try this first before I have to go the punch method. That's the second option. So the other option is also heating this bearing to expand it, and then it'll be easier to come off. Now we don't want to save this bearing because we're not going to reuse it. So if it gets destroyed in the process, it really doesn't matter. So let's just see how we go. It will depend on how much of an interference fit there is between that inner race and the spindle. I'm not expecting it to be huge. It should just be enough to locate it and stop it from spinning. So there's different classes of interference fits, and I'm not expecting a huge interference fit here. However, I've been wrong plenty of times before. Let's see how we go. Okay, so that moved really very easily. I didn't have to hit it very hard at all. Now obviously I'd like to have a longer piece of tube, but I don't. So I'm going to just gently tap around the edge. Or maybe get a punch and drive it all the way off. So it's almost off the step on that shoulder, so we might be able to get it right off. Now I don't want to hit the end of this spindle, so I probably should get a softer hammer, but that's not going to work against the steel. So I'm just going to be careful here. I don't want to hit the spindle, so I've got to be careful. Still coming. A smaller hammer. Here's my brass one. I just caught the spindle there. I don't want to do that again. It's definitely moving. It's below the level of these threads now. I'm going to keep hammering. Alright, like 2 more hits after I stopped the video when it came off. So it was sitting on this shovel. So this step here is the surface for the bearing to sit on. So when I put it back on, we're going to have to do it in reverse. We'll have to drive it on that way. So there we go. Now let's see if we can identify the bearing. So 18685 Timken again. So let's go have a look at the Google machine and see what we can find on the internet. Okay, so here's our 2 bearing part numbers. So I'm just going to Google it, and Timken 18685, get them on eBay. There's some Timken sites there, cad.timken.com, Amazon, timkenexport.com, eBay. You can get them everywhere, most industries. Now this is obviously defaulted to US, so if I add AU there, then I should get some Australian, AU. Hopefully I'll get some local sites, eBay, Amazon, Timken Australia store. So they're around. I'll find a bearing supplier. Now it doesn't have to be Timken, it could be SKF or NSK, or I don't know, pick your preferred bearing manufacturer. But I'm not going to buy them cheap from a no-name supplier, because there are stories floating around about counterfeit bearings. So you can obviously buy a Chinese knockoff, but that's not really going to help you. I'm not planning to spend all this time and effort on this lathe just to put a shit bearing in it. So I'll get good ones. I'll get Timken bearings and probably just replace them with exactly what's in there. So I'll call my bearing supplier tomorrow, and if they've got them on the shelf, great. If not, they'll order them in and I'll be here in a couple of days. So that's it. That's how to go and find it. Now I've double checked obviously that these are valid numbers by Googling the company name and the bearing number. So I could get an equivalent from NSK or anybody else. If I go to my bearing shop, he might not carry Timken, he might have, SKF, and he'll tell me that, there's an equivalent, a direct equivalent SKF bearing that I could purchase if I wanted to. So anyway, that's enough for today, and thanks for watching.